All right, welcome back to a bonus episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So, without further ado, let me tell you what we're doing right now. We're getting ready to release some of the archive that we found from when we were the sci-fi shenanigans. We're going to get those up there for the posts that were brought down. We thought you might enjoy them, and so without further ado, let us roll that beautiful. Oh wait, they're going to sue me. Play it.
Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans! Time for your daily dose of insanity over here at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions. A place where the sky's the limit, space is the place, and nerds run the world. And without further ado...
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast. So Winder couldn't be here again, but we'll push forward. We've brought on another veteran as co-host for this crazy podcast. Like I said, Winder has some stuff come up, so he won't be here. But he's as thrilled as I am. He's not leaving the show, and nobody fired him. We just sent him to a 12-step detox program for his crayon addiction. All jokes aside, he's just taking care of some personal things, and my son has needed me a lot lately. As I've mentioned before, they both have special needs. So we thought, we didn't want to slow down the podcast from our once a week. We wanted to keep the shenanigans going. So co-host seemed like the perfect solution. We went looking, and one of the criteria was we wanted them to be a veteran as well. So I asked my friend and fellow sci-fi nerd, Casey Azell, if she knew anyone, and she didn't hesitate to recommend Doc Cisca. She's not an author, just a rabid reader of the genre. So here we are. I already said how I first found her through Casey, but Casey, how did you first meet Cisca?
So I met Cisca like I meet so many wonderful people at DragonCon for the first time. My friend Ginger actually introduced me to her, and I think it was within the context of a room party that's thrown every year by by our mutual friend, speaker, also known as Dr. Rob Hampson. He gets a suite at the Hilton every year for DragonCon and opens it up for a couple of parties. And I believe it was at one of those that I first met Cisca. Is that right, Cisca, or was it LibertyCon?
No, it was at DragonCon, actually. Somebody said something about being female in the military, and I answered, and you kind of gave me this look, and I looked at Ginger and I went, well, I don't think that person's ever going to want to talk to me again. And she goes,
no, it was probably a look of, that's cool. I would like to meet that person.
I didn't know. I couldn't really interpret it because, it's DragonCon, so people get tired, and also there's so much noise that it can sometimes be hard to know also what people heard.
Sure. So. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I also have like the world's worst case of RBF. So I look really angry when I don't mean to.
I have foot and mouth disease.
Guilty. But everyone that knows and loves me just rolls their eyes. He did it again. So, all right, dear listener, let's get this party started. So, Cisca, the religion question: Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Trek.
What?
Oh, interesting.
Star Trek. Okay, so Star Trek was my first media exposure to sci-fi. And I was a ripe young, 6-year-old, and would tell people I wanted to be a captain in Starfleet. So after that, it just kind of had to continue. Plus, one of my best friends looks like James Avery to the point people have mistaken them. And doesn't help that he wears a Starfleet uniform.
All right, so if you're captaining a starship in Starfleet, which one?
Oh, I think the Defiant would be the best.
Justify your answer, madam.
Because it's a combat ship, and it's got stealth capabilities, shields. It's one of the toughest ships in the fleet.
I thought you were going to have like a cool answer, like it's the only ship that's replicator will make beer. But I mean, I guess we'll take combat ship.
I mean, it's only got one holodeck, but it's not a long-term generational ship like the Enterprise. And Voyager obviously has some navigational issues, so you know.
All right, note to self: don't drink Coke while she's talking, because I almost choked. Thanks, but
anytime.
But you knew that it wasn't a serious warship when the captain goes, Earl Grey, hot. Come on!
Oh no,
that
means shit's about to get real.
When they have a daycare facility.
Well, that
it's
too,
not
but
really a spaceship so much as a mobile flying post. It's got everything an army post has. It's a mobile flying post, and that's fine for an exploration or a diplomatic missions and stuff like that. But the Defiant's where it's at, because that ship is badass. Can I say that? Because it definitely is.
You can now. So, all right. So what is it you love about the genre of science fiction?
I love the possibilities of it. It's a great way to propose a world and changes that are that might be scary and kind of revolutionary at the time that the science fiction is being made, but really 10 years later aren't. And it's very hopeful to me. I like hopeful sci-fi. Even mill sci-fi that's hopeful, I like those because, you know, most of them we've figured out a way to pull our head out of our 4 points of contact and work as a collective race in a lot of cases. And I like that too. But I think it's honestly, it can be used as a social change. I mean, when Highline wrote Starship Troopers and women were combat pilots, it was revolutionary. But now it's really much more common. And I love that. So it was a way of showing a change to people where, because it's in a fictional environment, it's a little less scary.
What he gets more credit for with that one is the Juan Rico being not white, because he was Filipino.
Yeah,
so.
And he also had female infantrymen. So, I mean,
true.
I love that.
But
I think I come to I always remember the female pilots, because I had somebody try and argue with me that it was proof that he was sexist. And I went, it's not proof he was sexist. Not if you think about it in the time frame in which it was written.
Oh, because I've heard that argument. It was because I forget how he phrased it, but he basically implied that women were better as pilots. And the majority of the women in fleet, in the Starship Troopers, universe or whatever, the majority of the pilots were women. And I've seen that where they're like, well, why do they have to be women? How come they can't be infantry and mobile infantry? Which was, again, ridiculous, because he did have female mobile infantry characters. But yeah, I always thought that was funny too. It was like, oh, okay, so that's sexist, huh? That's a new word for me, I guess.
Bear in mind, I also just got my second degree in chemistry, so I've been around a lot of young college-age students. So, and they have a very different view sometimes.
Indeed.
So, I have a question real quick. So, you said that the first show you ever watched in sci-fi was Star Trek. What about like reading or playing games or movies? What were your earliest sci-fi exposures in those genres? Or media, I guess.
I would say that The Rowan, actually, by Anne McCaffrey, was the book that started it all for me. It's sci-fi, and it was my mom pulled a net. She thought I was faking being sick, so she handed me the book, and she goes, "You can watch TV once you've read the first chapter." The first chapter is over 150 pages because the entire book is only like 3 chapters. Yeah, my mom fought dirty, but it won. And so I was in either 5th or 6th grade at the time, and that had me hooked. As for Within gaming, trying to think. I'm really the result of what happens when gamers breed. So I'm trying to think what the first sci-fi. I really am though. So I don't know. I mean, I grew up playing StarCraft and Warcraft. I grew up with D&D manuals. My brother actually learned how to read on the first gen D&D manuals because he's not cute. Dyslexic and or LD, so he's a little special child with that in my family. But yeah, I just grew up around it. It was in everything that I did, the science fiction and fantasy around me. And my mom would look at people like when I was little and I was answering I wanted to be in Starfleet, and they'd go, well, don't you want her to have realistic goals? And my mom would go, how do you think we're going to get something like Starfleet if we don't have kids who want that?
That's cool. So. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So what do you, you mentioned that, I mean, obviously science fiction had a large presence in your family. What do you think has the largest influence on which science fiction subgenres like you choose to read today? Is it what you grew up with, or is it something else in your life?
I would say now I have lots of friends who are authors now, and so some of that is because I want to see the work that they've created. So sometimes I will pick up a book that may not have been my cup of tea when I started. But all my friends loved and raved about that. The Black Tide Rising series was actually that for me because I don't do zombies or zombie-like things at all, except for that one universe.
Sure.
But I'd say a lot of it's the story. I'll look at the story, the background, and see if it's something that I want or jive. I think I'm still very story-driven, or characters that I can identify with. Or sometimes they're characters. Mm-hmm. There's one series, Jody Lynn Nine writes, it starts with View of the Imperium. And I picked it up to read it because, well, Jody wrote it and she's a good friend, but I kept reading it because I actually hated the main character at first. And I actually told her that I hated that character at the beginning of the book. But I grew to loving that character because the character grew and changed. And one of my favorite lines in the book about the series is when this friend goes, why are you here? And he goes, I'm learning to be useful. So,
No, I just say that's always a good reason to be somewhere. So before we transition, when you've mentioned that you have a lot of friends that are authors and that you read because they've written the book, have you ever read a book written by a friend and be like, dude, these people are seriously effed up and they need lots of therapy?
Can I plead the fifth? Yeah, yes, I have. And yeah, I have. And I think I kind of politely told them that they needed to expand their worldview and get some experiences, and that I would really like them to. I'd like to help them choose which experiences they went for.
All right. So we're going to assume that was not the case for when you read Casey's Hunter stuff in the Four Horsemen universe.
No. It was not actually any time in the last 4 or 5 years. And the person was somebody I'd known for a very long time. And my brother looked at me and he goes, wow, was that ever well said and so well put politely.
So if there was anything in Hunter that you thought, man, these people are insane, you could always blame Marissa since she's not here.
I thought Hunter was beautifully well done. I think that I don't want to give too much away, but there's some very distinctly female viewpoints that I'm not sure anybody who hasn't dealt with some of those kind of issues about like continuing a species and everything, that honestly I was so blown away with how they dealt with it. And without it it's a very emotional issue, so it's very easy for it to bring down the book, but it was dealt with well and without ruining the pace of the book and still giving those emotions their due. It's very hard to say that anything on it without giving it away.
So Casey, did you? I know you popped out because the connection lost for a second, but did you hear the question?
No, I didn't.
So she had mentioned because she read some of her friends' books. I asked her if she ever read her friend's book and was like, "Ooh, these people are seriously insane and they need therapy." So that's what you walked back into, and that's why I said that anything wrong with Hunter that made her think that she can always assume Marissa was the crazy one.
I think she knows better.
All right, so transitioning from the reading side of things for a little bit, let's delve into the fandom streak. So have you sent any cool fan art or done some sweet cosplay for any of your favorite characters yet?
A couple years ago when Pokemon Go came out, I did a Candela cosplay, which for those of you who are not uber geeky, that is the leader of the Red Faction. So I made my Viking spawn become Red Team because if I'm doing a Candela cosplay, I have to be part of her team. So he didn't get to vote for his favorite color of blue for our team. It's red.
Sometimes mom just decides.
I told him, he looks at me and he goes, "But I voted." And I went, "Welcome to the benevolent dictatorship of mom."
That's right. That's right.
I've heard that before in my life as well. Some things are universal.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at doing another cosplay. I only really go to one Dragon Con, and that where there's a lot of cosplay. And at Dragon Con, I'm normally working, so I have to balance my cosplay with actually being accessible to people. So as somebody told me, I can't wear a mask the first year as a director. I'm like, but they don't need to know who I am. I was told I was wrong.
I was going to ask what unaccessible cosplay would be, but apparently masks is the limit. Okay, good to know.
That's what I was told.
So, have you ever? So I know that you are friends with a lot of your favorite authors. You're friends with a lot of my favorite authors. What have you ever done? Like, have you ever tracked anyone down to get an autograph of a favorite author or anything like that?
I tracked down Corporal Foss, who her first name is Brooke. I tracked down Christopher Polini at Dragon Con to get him to sign a gift for her, and that was funny because he is like Anne is for me.
Sure.
For her.
Sure.
It's what and the funny thing is I only had one book in my hand when I finally tracked him down, and it was the book. It was Black Tide Rising. So I had him sign Black Tide Rising for her.
You had Christopher Polini sign John Ringo's book.
By the way, he loved it. He thought it was hilarious. He actually remembered me. Brooke has incredibly distinctive hair now that she's out, and he remembered doing a signing in Alaska and signing her books. And then, but he's also a huge Black Tide Rising fan.
Yeah, that's funny.
And so he was like, "This is hilarious." And then it was funny because I took it to the mass signing and I made everybody sign it, including the editor and Tony. And then John goes, "Why is Polini's signature in here?" Like, we're in the middle of a signing. I'll explain it later.
That's funny. That's funny.
So you signed it that year, actually.
Yeah. Did I?
Because you were like, "Well, who is this?" And she's I think you and her kind of tied for biggest badasses in my life.
Oh, again, you're being kind, but thank you.
So she's got combat spurs from her time as a tanker medic and stuff like that. So I mean, she's awesome and amazing.
Yeah, legit. Yeah, for sure.
And tankers are okay. They're almost infantry.
They just don't like to put their feet on the ground.
Death before dismount and all that.
I mean, come on. So other than at a con, because obviously I know that you are heavily involved with Dragon Con, and so you interact with authors all the time there. Have you ever spotted a favorite author out in the wild, as it were?
No, I haven't. My first Dragon Con, I ended up in line behind one of my favorite authors before I was involved with Dragon Con at all. I'd only been at Dragon Con for 2 hours.
Uh-huh.
And that's actually how I met Todd. We ended up in line behind him, and my friend who dragged me to Dragon Con, her family kind of collectively kidnapped me that year for my first Dragon Con. Looked and I'm like, don't you do it. And she tapped him on the shoulder and she goes, she won't talk to you, but she wants to. And, yeah.
And that's how you met Todd McCaffrey.
Yes. We were standing in line for a panel and we were right behind him.
That's awesome. He's such a nice guy. I can totally see him being like, well, hello.
We stayed up till like 4:00 in the morning talking, and we did dinner. And that's actually how I met Jody. And Jody and Bill came over and sat down and we all ate. And I looked at him after they left and I went, I'd really love to meet Jody Lindine one day. And he went, you just did. I'm like, but what? And I just was kind of like, you should have told me that.
See, I have it on good authority that all the fun stuff at Dragon Con happens at the bar after the panels end.
All the fun stuff at Dragon Con happens everywhere at Dragon Con. You can't go anywhere at Dragon Con without fun stuff happening.
You're not having fun at Dragon Con. I think it's honestly either something is really, 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 really crazy, like level 20 out of a scale of 1 to 10 bad in your life, or you're just dead set on not having fun.
Yeah. It's a pretty wild time. It's a pretty wild time. So what's like the weirdest or funniest interaction that you've ever had with a favorite author?
I do remember one time. So, I was in college and Todd called me and the first words out of his mouth were, I'm sorry, but I had to do it. To which I have two brothers who are, I think you've met my brothers, Casey, but anybody, you can definitely tell that we came from the same source. So the first words that came to mind were, what did you do? And then he goes, I made you into a character on Pern because I just couldn't resist. Oh, okay, that's acceptable.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the werewolf.
I'm gonna have to go back and reread Todd's books and see if I can find
Dragon's Kin, chapter 14. My mother read that, looked at me, and she goes, "He knows you really well."
That's awesome.
So, I'm like, I don't know what to say about that, Mom. I'm just gonna go over here. But yeah, so I would say that one was one of the funnier ones because you don't think of going, what did you do to a best-selling author who's older than you and going
right, yeah,
like they're your younger brother and you're going to have to like flay them or something.
That is one way to get internet famous, though, if you filmed it and put it online. I'm just saying.
There was one time where a couple years ago when before I actually knew John rather well, I went to his he was on a panel about writing villains, and I open up my bag and I pull out booze, and Bill Fawcett decides to razz me, and he goes, "You're going to pull booze out in front of John and not offer him some?"
Okay. That's a legitimate question.
John looked at him like, I'm going to beat you. He did not want any more, apparently.
Well, if it was Dragon Con, he probably had quite a bit the night before. It was. Yeah, for sure.
So one of these days you're going to be at a con and you're going to have like this empty Jack bottle and you're just going to pour tea in it so no one knows and just chug it straight out of the bottle the whole time. And they're going to be like, dude, that's hardcore. I could see it.
Yeah, nobody would blink twice at Dragon Con.
I actually did that on a school trip with some KS. I was on a study abroad trip, and I let them think that I was drinking way more than I was, just so they left me alone. And I would routinely do that actually in the Army, being the only female medic in the barracks in an E4, I would get a lot of people knocking on my door, like staff duty CQ. And so I took to having an empty beer bottle by the door to open it after I was just done with dealing with people for the day, whether or not I'd been drinking, because they'd see the beer bottle and then they'd leave me alone.
Yeah.
Because you can't report to duty if you're intoxicated. That's brilliant. I just got married and left the barracks, but the beer angle might have been cheaper in the long run. I joke. I love my wife.
Probably less fun.
But
well, I'm glad that worked out for you. Most barracks marriages don't work out, so.
I kid. We were actually dating before then, but that's not as fun of a story.
No, it's not.
Right, for sure.
So this is the moment, dear listener, where we pause and we shamelessly shill for the man. So please bear with us for this commercial interlude.
Magnus watched as the three Jujari warriors stood up on their hind legs and drew their swords. The good news, he thought, is there aren't more. The bad news was that he didn't want his MAR-30's report attracting any more contact, but he highly doubted he'd be able to beat the enemy without his primary weapon. He lowered his blaster's output, deployed the spring-loaded bayonet below the muzzle, and then pulled his serrated combat blade from behind his chest plate. "Awen," Magnus yelled, "I want you to run." "What?" "Run!" Hey, this is Christopher Hopper, author of the Ruins of the Galaxy novels. If you love a good adventure that mixes space opera and military sci-fi, then I think you'll love Book 1 in my new series entitled The Eve of War. It's available on Kindle at just 99 cents for a limited time. Books 2 and 3 are also set to release in the next 2 months, so if you're looking for your next sci-fi binge, you've come to the right place. Visit ruinsofthegalaxy.com or check out the books on Amazon for an adventure you won't forget. This is Christopher. See you in the ruins.
All right. Welcome back to the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast. And we're back with our new co-host where we're letting you get to meet her. So this is the part where of the introduction, or the interview, I should say, where I would normally tell you about what the guest has written. But as we said, Cisca isn't an author. She's even cooler. She's an Uber fan. So instead, why don't you tell us, Cisca, about your top 5 books or series and why they are special to you?
Well, as I covered earlier, The Roan will always be special to me because it's the book that really got me into reading. It was the first character I ever read that I really identified with, and I think that's why. Plus, I mean, telepaths and teleporting, what's not to like? I really like the Honor Harrington series. It's Honor of the Queen is my favorite of all time. That's just kind of the character as a female, particularly female in the military, you'd want to emulate. I have so many that keep coming to mind, and it's really hard to choose any of them as a favorite. I love Mercedes Lackey's Valdemar world. It's just beautifully constructed, where it's all very diffuse because she wrote it in trilogies for the most part, but it all still ties together, and it's just beautifully thought out and created. And the characters are ones that you connect with, even if you don't like them sometimes. So Louise McMaster Bujold, her Miles Verkosigan saga is just awesome, and each story is unique and different. And it was the first, she has a character that when he dies, you just kind of, he's done a lot of stuff that throughout the series, particularly as a woman, that I'm like, he should die. He really should. But you also understand that he is just so broken and so damaged that even though he did those horrible things, he didn't really understand he was being horrible. And when he does die, I cried. Her characters are so real and so well-rounded. It's insane. And I love that. And she uses a sense of humor with it to keep it from getting too crazy. And it's a shame in some ways because that character actually dies, but you see echoes of him throughout the series, but he dies in like the 3rd book of the series. It's Sergeant Baratheon. He's in Cordelia's Honor, which is actually an omnibus of 2 books, and then he dies in The Warrior's Apprentice. He is probably one of my favorite tragic characters, honestly. so hard for me to pick just 5.
I mean, you could list more. We won't stop you.
I liked the Anita Blake series. I thought that was really neat. Particularly because I was reading it I started reading it as a junior in high school. So there is some definite character development that I would definitely say influenced how I view personal dynamics. And because there's a lot of that in her books. And in some ways it was great to read it because that meant I didn't have to experience and make those same mistakes or not mistakes.
Yeah, sure.
I love Elizabeth Moon, and really and truly, she does some great stuff. The Deeds of Pachysandria are amazing. I really like her kind of YA Mill SF, the Vada saga. So, but she did a book, and not a lot of people have read it, that just has influenced my life in every way, which is The Speed of Dark. It's actually found in the literature section, but it's a world where she deals with is it right to force medication on people for a mental disorder or a genetic disorder, force a treatment on them, even if they don't want it, as well as what is disorder and what is personality. And I can never keep the book in stock because I buy it and immediately give it to people because I'm like, you need to read this. I've probably bought like 5 to 10 copies of it since it came out in the early 2000s. I grew up in the special needs community as well as the fandom community. And one of the things her character is dealing with is autism. And he talks about how he has these personality quirks, but they're just personality quirks. But he will occasionally work with a therapist who has decided like the fact that he likes fencing and that it's fun means he's violent, or the fact that he doesn't like to go to movie theaters because they're crowded and there's so many smells and noises that labels him antisocial. It's not. These are just personality quirks. So where does disorder begin in personality? And sometimes it's just personality, even when sometimes it's disorder, and where do we chalk them up? And I think it's just beautiful. I tell people, if you read the first 15 pages of that book and think about it, then you've gotten your money's worth out of it.
That sounds really interesting.
It does.
That sounds really
I'm going to
cool.
have to check that out.
Yeah.
So now this is also important to note that given that we're all about the same age and 20, we remember when it was hard to find, like, if there was a book 2 in a series, you had to look for it. I mean, we're talking Dewey Decimal System in the card catalog if you really wanted to look for that next book. Even today, you'll still see vestigials of that on Amazon, where some of the books you like I love the Sharp series, but if you look at any one of the books, like, they're not linked in Amazon like a modern author, like the newer authors would do today, where you link them. Like, you have to dig title by title and really want it.
Yep.
So this is dedication.
Yeah, no,
right
I had
there.
to do that with the Verkosigan saga and custom order them. And my brother was like, I'm going to borrow and keep that. I'm like, you better bring that book back because I had to hunt that thing down.
Yep. I can remember haunting the bookstores haunting the bookstores, the Stars and Stripes bookstores on Clark Air Base when I was a kid, like waiting for the next book in whatever series I was reading. I don't even remember, but like every week I'd be like, Mom, can we go to the bookstore? Mom, can we go to the bookstore? And she was like, Casey, it's not out yet. It didn't matter. I had to go. I had to check because I needed it, you know?
Okay, so I'm going to date myself. And actually, I just clicked. One of those things that happens sometimes for me is if I remember you from one situation, I tend to forget that, like the entire Jody's that Jody.
Right.
So we had a media play by my house, and I got really lucky because one of the guys who he kind of oversaw the book section of media play is an author, James A. Moore. And he's done some YA. He's written a lot of horror, but the series that he has right now that's really taken off is fantasy. But he was great at always helping me with that and indulging me and helping me find more books than just because my mom is such a voracious reader. I really wanted to find a book and read it, one that she hadn't read already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I know how that goes too. Because same situation. My mom's a huge reader as well.
Yeah, my mother is as well, and that's what saved me from all the boring English teachers that make you almost hate the written word because they give you the most boring stuff to read, and then they tell you, oh, this is there, and it's like sometimes a book is just a book. Can't we just enjoy it? No.
The curtains were blue.
Yes,
the curtains were effing blue.
And sometimes a blue curtain is just a blue curtain, and a cigar is just a cigar.
Absolutely.
But there's a funny story, and I don't know if it's true, but I've heard it was with Frost, but I've heard it attributed to other authors, where he sat in on a class and they were asking him about what this meant or that meant, and it was the curtains were just blue because I like the color blue. Because that's where they came up with this alternative theory in the English departments where, well, the author might not know they meant fill in the blank.
Exactly.
But subconsciously.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's always funny. I did my undergrad not my undergrad, but my graduate work in creative writing because I needed a master's degree so I could continue to be a pilot. That whole concept of meaning exists in the mind of the reader. It's true. Meaning does exist in the mind of the reader. But it's really funny what meanings sometimes the readers will assign to completely innocuous things like that. It's like, no, man, blue is just my favorite color. I made the curtains blue because I like blue, So,
right. All right. So we'll back with Doc. So with that in mind, let's talk about what you look for in a main character of a book that you like. So what is it that makes the character, the real person in air quotes that is the main character click for you and makes you care what happens to them?
Well, I think first they have to be rounded. I can't stand flat characters. I really don't connect with them because, well, nobody's really a flat character when you get down into knowing them. And
what do you mean by flat character or rounded character? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, I'm surprised. You have the master's degree, and that was what my English teacher used those terms all the time. Are you making me?
I know what I mean. I want to know what you mean.
So a flat character is just a person without the depth. They're there really for like one purpose. Children's books are filled with them. Well, I'm just a flat character. I just think the world is blue, and I just think that like Pig the pig and the three little pigs, they're flat characters,
Sure.
And then rounded characters are ones with the depth. They have flaws, they have interests, they have motivations, they have things they need to work on, they have blind spots. I did a paper all about when I was in high school on Mercedes Lackey's Arrows of the Queen, and that character, that book was just really novel because when it came out, it was one of the early books kind of directed for young adults, even though it wasn't really a young adult genre because there wasn't a genre yet for that. And it was, I think, a bestseller, even though it was like her first book. And because it was not a flat character, that character, she struggles with the fact that she's had stuff hidden from her all of her life, that she thinks that she's just a girl and she has all these limitations that she shouldn't be able to do, but she's learning that she can do them, she should do them, and being true to yourself is following what you're good at and doing the right thing, even if it's not always comfortable. So, and I loved that. And she struggles with, she starts off the book and thinking that her purpose in life is to have babies. And even though she loves to read and everybody around her is like, girls should not read. And then she learns that the ruler of her kingdom is actually a female. Like that, even that's been hidden from her really by her parents. And that even though she loves her family, she doesn't love how they brought her up. And so those are all things in the series of Valdemar, she deals with some of those. And
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned, you mentioned this earlier, the one particular character in the Vorkosigan series. What about other like secondary characters? What makes a secondary character or a sidekick, especially memorable to you?
I think if there's something standoutish about them, like Scotty Tremaine in the David Weber series, he always stuck out because, well, honestly, when I was younger, I thought he would be really cute and fun to date. That's one reason he stuck out. I'll be honest.
I mean, I had a crush on Les's son, so I can't argue with you.
So, I'm sorry, guys. We can't just blame Disney anymore for having really great examples of males. No, I actually had a more of a crush on Les's partner than on the son, but I can understand that too. He was very cutie.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody is rolling their eyes.
Oh, for sure.
But I think if there's something where there's a connection to the character, or they just show a different type of character in the universe, everybody in the RMN is very serious, and he is very much scrappy. He's bonded to this senior NCO who is like old and crusty and is like, don't do what I did, kid. And he's like, but you're awesome.
Right. Yeah. I enjoyed that dynamic between those two as well.
Yeah. And I think they have to have their own personality and their own story to them to be really quality side characters. If they're just there to be a foil, they get kind of boring.
Sure. So how about then?
So did you ever watch the Xena Warrior Princess as a kid? Because I grew up watching.
Hell yeah, she was amazing.
So would you count Gabrielle as flat, or would she be standoutish to you as an example that people can have seen?
She transforms. She starts out to me as very kind of flat, and she gets more depth as she experiences things in life. And at one point, there's a point in the series where you could almost do the series off of her because she becomes complex enough, and that's really great. Actually, there's and I think I've joked with Jody in her View of the Imperium series. There's a character who he's almost a side character he's like the valet of the main character. I really want that guy's story. Like, that is the perfect sidekick, because I'm almost like, okay, you have all these points where you disappear and you go on this secret mission. I want that story, dude. That makes like a great side character. When you look at them and you're like, I want your story as like a novella or a short story at least. If that makes sense.
Okay. It does.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I feel that way about villains a lot of time. Like, as somebody once said to me, every villain is also the hero of their own story. And I feel like a lot of times I want to be like, well, why are you the way that you are? Why are you such a bad guy? What, in what way does this behavior make you the hero of your own story? Tell me about your favorite villains and what makes you love to hate them.
Ooh, I think, the Peeps are one of my favorite villains because, David Weber, Honor Harrington, but it's not all of them. It's when they're doing the Committee of Public Safety that I really, and the ones at the beginning of the series, I really hate them because I think they embody the worst of where society could go, and they're so indulgent, and that they don't care. The top really doesn't care what happens anymore. They've been rightly or wrongly entrusted, and they've deliberate over generations, and they've deliberately steered their society into this gilded cage format. And I really hate that. And then, I think in the Ringo's Here Be Dragons, There Will Be Dragons saga, the villains in that he has a couple villains that are just like, there's just one that just wants to make everybody suffer and like do crazy, stupid, illegal experiments.
Yeah, that one chick. Yeah.
Yeah. She's scary. And then but like the villain that I both love, and I'm also like, you're just too impatient, dude, and you got to like think about it from all the other perspectives, is the one who kind of organizes all the, and he goes a little nutty because he's like, I want to save humanity. And I want to do it by stripping away all the technology. But he refuses to listen to people who are like, actually, the birth rate is on the rise. It's just really slow because we're living a lot longer, dude.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that he's kind of like the epitome of maybe every teenager. I want something, but I'm not going to listen to you. I'm just going to run straight into this wall repetitively and make everybody else go along with me.
Yeah.
And then there's the demon who just wants sheer chaos. So I think what I like is that in that universe, there's such a variety of villain.
Yeah.
Too. So because they all bond together to be villainous, even though they're for very different reasons.
What about like technology? You know, what kind of technology do you like to see, and how does that, you know, you seem very focused on the character piece of the story. How do those two things intersect well for you?
I like it when tech is fluid to the story. There is, you know, I after a certain point, I will go, I am done reading. Yes, she threw a lot of missiles at him. Way to go. I mean, I like knowing it. I like seeing that depth, that it's a completely thought out universe. And I definitely like in like the Here Be Dragons that the tech kind of disappears very early on because that tech level was just too easy. I like how in David Weber's he shows that the need to find a way to fix a problem drives the development of the technology. Whether that problem be the fact that you have a small population base and the need for a lot of ships because you have a lot of border to protect. So it drives the automation and it drives because that's really how tech works. If you look at occupational therapy was non-existent before any of the world wars. And then there was a leap forward after World War I, and then another leap forward in this rehabilitative medicine field after World War II, when we had all of these people coming back injured, and then Vietnam, and then again during Desert Storm. Well, not really so much Desert Storm 1, but during the War on Terror, we've seen it again. We're having massive leaps in rehabilitative medical technology, medical treatments because of a need. And need really does drive the development of technology, whether it's being agricultural. I mean, we've seen the same thing with how we deal with the rice that they're growing in India, and people can say what they want about GMOs. Yes, there's some good things, there's some bad things, but we have a lot of people who wouldn't be eating if it weren't for them. And so that need to, you know, sustain a population has driven technology throughout history. And I loved that David really shows that very well, even though sometimes I'm like, yeah, David, I get it. Big missiles, big booms. Got it. I was reading his Safehold series and I went, I don't need to learn if I wanted to learn how to sail a boat, I would take sailing classes. I want to read a story.
So you know, besides technology, one of the other hallmarks of sci-fi as a genre is this, you know, the idea of alien species. What do you expect from an alien species that you're going to read about? Like, you know, can they be like humans? Can they be very different? Should they be something we recognize or something unrecognizable? What pleases you?
Oh, I think what pleases me overall is it's got to be something plausible and feasible enough and consistent. I mean, there's a lot of things we don't know. Like Anne wrote about triple-stranded DNA helixes on Pern.
Right.
You know, we don't know if that's plausible or not, but she decided to make a world and she was consistent with it. Actually, one of the things that drives me nuts about David Weber's is that other than the tree cats, there are no real aliens.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have that one.
So, well, I mean, there's the basilisk system,
Yeah.
but I mean, so I'm kind of like, I'm kind of going, I would hope that we would eventually find other life.
Sure.
I think I loved AC Crispin's Star Academy series. Because she had a ton of different aliens. I mean, one of them was literally looked like a blanket.
Yeah.
But they still all had a drive. I think there needs to be a drive to them, whether we understand how they think or not. I do find it fun to read aliens where I don't necessarily understand how they think. It can get a little old sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a way to why they think. When you watch Independence Day, as a series, I'm like, well, there's got to be a rhyme and reason to why they think. And I understand in a movie they're probably not going to get into that, but I would love to see that.
Sure.
So even if it's just and we just want to destroy everybody. So, I mean, you can get some territorial people, but I think that there's got to be some sort of drive to why they are the way they are, and deep down, one of the greatest turns actually that I read was Ileana Andrews is a writing pair, but they do a serial called The Innkeeper Chronicles. And they have a whole bunch of different kinds of aliens in there. And Earth, most of it takes place on Earth in the series. But it is kind of neat because they put it up a segment of a time, and then when they're done with the story, they pull it down, they edit it, and put it out as a novella. But they have an alien race that is out to kill, in one of the novellas, that is out to systematically just destroy another one. And nobody knows why. And it's been happening for centuries. And it's down to less than 2,000 of this alien race. And I mean, they will literally they will destroy star systems just to kill one of these guys. And there's a big plot twist about why. You find out in the novella at the end why they have been so bent on destroying them, and it really was really neat because it very much surprised me. So
cool.
And I don't want to give it away.
Yeah. That sounds great.
I mean, we try to do spoiler free here, but while we're talking sci-fi, and we've mentioned that you're a medical professional, so the famous three seashells. Did you ever figure that out?
Huh?
Have you seen Demolition Man?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I'm horrible at movies.
Okay, so in Demolition Man,
that's the one where he knits. He has PTSD and he knits, right?
Yeah. They brainwashed him while he was asleep, and they taught him knitting as therapy for his criminal behavior.
Yes. I never really did figure that out.
One of these days, someone's going to give me the answer. Dang it.
So.
All right. Jokes aside, so does your nerd card spread out past the books? You mentioned that your parents are nerds as well, and they did the RPG. So are you into RPGs, video games, movies for sci-fi?
I do RPGs. I am not as into video games. I think the first time I saw a video game was 1990. We didn't have them in Saudi Arabia, so until then, one person had one. So I don't know, just never really hit me. I will play computer games, and I have to be very cautious because I will go down the rabbit hole, and it will get scary, and I will look at you and go away, don't touch my keyboard, I will hurt you. So I was like that while playing Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate and Dragon's Quest. Dragon's Age.
I remember those.
Yeah. And Dungeon Keeper. Dungeon Keeper is my all-time favorite game. And I very much was like that. And it was not nice. So I actually would get books and games. Games everybody gets taken away from. My mom would have to search my room for the books that I was hiding when I was grounded.
So, what specific RPGs?
I grew up on D&D. I've played the Star Wars game. I like Pathfinder. I've played Mage. I even have a signed copy of the Dresden one.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's just been hard for me to get a gaming group going, so I haven't played an RPG in a while. And when I was stationed at Fort Bliss, our RPG group was super close. They came over every week, and depending on who was in the field, which DM was in the field, depended somewhat on what game, but it was just open format, and I'd be like, the doors are unlocked at 4, game starts at 6. I will be ready for you to show up at 5:30. And basically anybody that showed up from 4 to 5:30 was in danger of being put to work. Peeling potatoes or whatever it was for dinner that I was like, I'm behind on, out of my way. So let me go vacuum the floor for me. Casey's probably laughing because she's seen where I have done that in fantasy literature to people.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I also have played Warhammer and fantasy. I was Sisters of Battle. And what else for 40K? For fantasy, and Sisters of Battle was 40K. I still have a Let the Heresy Begets Retribution shirt that I used to wear around. That was always funny when I wore it on a military post because people would really stare at me. I'm not sure if I was serious or not. And I also am a huge food nerd. I love food and all of its greatness. And have been known to make candied bacon, and that I've cured the bacon and then candied it and brought it to con. And caffeinated chocolate espresso Rice Krispie treats are another one that I'll bring to Dragon Con. So.
Yeah, fantasy literature is about to be the most well-fed track at Dragon Con. I think you're going to make the other tracks jealous.
All right, so we actually have had Casey for a limited time. The Air Force likes to take up too much of her time, so we're going to let her bow out, and we will continue the last few questions without her. All right. So, unfortunately, we lost Casey. She had her Air Forcely duties. So I think that meant the putter broke, or I don't know, whatever they do in the Air Force. But speaking of the military, since you are a veteran and you have mentioned that you read military science fiction subgenre, let's talk about it. What's your biggest pet peeve when you read about other futuristic service members fighting the odds in unforgiving voids of space? Obviously, we speak generally here. There's no reason to call anyone out because karma is a thing.
I would say, and this was actually, it was a short story somebody handed me and asked me my opinion on, and they were a civilian. So, and I think they have since nuked the story, or at least the character, because I kept looking at them and going, an officer wouldn't do that. An officer would not, a captain of a spaceship would not be reading out the daily news. That they have better things to do, like sleep, like anything. So I think when they do something so distinctly not military in a quote unquote military environment, that there's just no plausibility to it. You know, an E4 specialist is not okay. We might tell a lieutenant what to do. But there should be repercussions for it. I would say that, you know, a specialist shouldn't tell a general that they made the wrong choice, but I was there when that happened and I survived the day. So, but you have to be very careful about how things are done. And I think when people forget that there is a rank structure and a plausibility to things, that it really breaks it apart for me. If that makes sense.
It does. That's why I didn't make staff sergeant, because the colonel asked my opinion and I stupidly thought he really wanted my opinion, and oops.
Yeah, I had a lieutenant who asked me what I thought of Twilight, and it was about the movie, and I was not a big fan of the movie. Apparently it very much upset her, but I'm forever sorry that I upset her to this day. as much as it did, mostly because I think that's why I didn't go to the promotion board for a good while after that. But sorry, I had somebody who wanted to poke me, I guess, on Facebook, which I failed to realize was open. But, I mean, you have to have something officers in high heels, that would drive me nuts. Luckily, I don't think I've seen that, but there has to be a plausibility about some of it. Even though with the tech changes, there's still an attitude to it. Kevin Stevenson has a great character that I loved because he really hit on the entire enlisted, you want to screw me with rules? Well, I'll screw you back harder mentality that I loved.
Who did that?
Kevin Stevenson. So he does the Fleet series. It's not Fleet, sorry. The Salvage Fleet is the name of the most recent title. But he has a character who would never fit into a military system. So he goes, that character's not going to fit in a military system. So he's not even going to try and shoehorn that character into it. And he even addresses it in the series. He's like, you're not going to survive if we try and make this a military-esque unit. So, because the character has no ability to be military-esque even. So I think you have to know, you don't have to be in the military to kind of get some of the humor of it. You don't even have to do the humor. David Weber doesn't do a ton of military humor in his books, but he does have very much the plausibility and the practicality that goes with being in the service.
Okay.
Within his characters. So
when you mentioned the high heels, so I'm going to go there. So what did you think about the miniskirts in Star Trek then? In the Starfleet?
I didn't like that. That bothered me even as a kid. So that always threw me. And I'm really grateful by the time they got around to Starfleet being in wars that they had gotten rid of that, because that would have that cringes for me. And that actually is part of why I have such a hard time watching, and people are probably going to hunt me down and either duct tape me to a chair and make me watch it or flog me. And I'll stand by it though. I'm not a big fan of the original, precisely because the stuff like the boots and the skirts, they just throw me out of my enjoyment, because I'm like, nobody on a ship would wear, why are you, it just, it kind of makes me melt and have a little practicality. I'm going to hurt somebody. It's hurting my brain. I want to hurt you back mentality on it. I don't like it. It's what I don't like about the originals.
All right. So following that, what about military science fiction done right? Which author or series has the best futuristic military?
Those are fighting words. That's how to cause I just went to fantasize. I think that question alone would cause the con to erupt into some very divided lines. I think that the Four Horsemen universe is really kind of interesting because it takes the concept of military as a national entity, because it doesn't really involve armies of countries but mercenary units. Instead, very neat and different, and I like that because there is a different psychology. I mean, when you're fighting for pay versus fighting for God and country. Then I really like some of David Weber's stuff, and I don't know. I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place on it. Can I just say the Defiant? No, that's just a ship in Starfleet. So it doesn't count. But I don't know. It's really hard to say. I really don't know which one has the best. They all have things that I like, one or the other. What I love about the RMN is they have so many officers that really, truly embody what's right in the esprit de corps that we wish to see in our officers, because he doesn't have many enlisted characters. That is a bit of a beef that I've argued with, that there needs to be more enlisted characters in military sci-fi. So anybody out there, you can hear me, more military characters, more enlisted characters, because it is a very different world, officer versus enlisted. And somebody once tried telling me it's because enlisted don't really drive, an enlisted character wouldn't really drive the story. And I'm like, you're kind of full of crap and don't know many enlisted. I'm like, you don't know many enlisted people. That's why.
I wrote a military sci-fi story with Winder, the other co-host, and we actually focused on a corporal, so it can be done.
It can be done. I just think that person was being lazy and probably didn't know many enlisted. So, and I don't even know who they are. They may be listening, and I don't know who they are. I met them in the throngs of Dragon Con. I don't know. I know we have some of the worst.
But we don't want to do the worst because like I said,
but when they're the worst, like one of the ones that I read that was the worst, it was deliberately designed to be the worst. Just because they were like, this is, well, it was actually, it's in Jodi's series. It's not all of them. It's just one specific ship that's the worst because it's designed to have the floppish nobles who aren't really supposed to be able to do anything anyways on it. But the rest of the military is really great. So, and the world is really well thought out. So the rest of the military is really great. One of my favorites as a fun one to read is Strong Arm Tactics. I would say that really embodies some of the best versatility that should be in the military and in any good military. If you've read Strong Arm Tactics, you'll understand why and be giggling. And if not, you really need to read it because it's super good. It's super funny. Jodi, she's a civilian, but she gets that humor amazingly well. And you end up having a battlefield in a amusement park.
Interesting.
Yes.
All right. So we don't want to put
one of my favorites.
So we don't want to put you on the spot anymore by calling out your friends and family. So we'll just move on. So, all right, enough shameless bragging about yourself. What are you currently reading in science fiction?
I am currently reading Assassin. I actually read Hunter and then got yelled at because I hadn't read Assassin. So I'm reading Assassin right now by Casey Zell, who, and then, what was it? I read Hope is Not a Strategy. Just recently finished that one too, and it was it's a good anthology. And then it's by Mel Todd. That's on my next to read. It's from Badass Publishing, and I can't remember which one. And she has a Catalan saga that's really good. It's urban science fiction. So it's set near future. The world is very much the same, but it actually, when you start reading it, you think that it's going to be fantasy, but it's not. It really is. The main character suddenly, for no reason that she understands, while working as a cop, turns into a cougar.
Interesting.
Yeah,
like a cougar, as in like she's hunting young men to date, or
no,
like literally
kind of like shapeshifter. So yeah, and she has no idea or control over why. She just starts doing it, and as I said, I always mispronounce it, and she's gonna yell at me because later. The Kaladin Chronicles, KAYLID Chronicles, and No Choice is the first one, and each book kind of follows a different character they're suddenly not purely human, and they don't know why. And all I'm going to say on this as a spoiler is it is actually science fiction, not fantasy.
Fair enough. All right. So I actually just finished Ghosts of Empire by Terry Mixon, which I've literally read 6 times at this point. But I didn't have my blog when I started, because I started reading him before I was writing. So I was like, well, I'm going to do a review. So I'm rereading his series again, enjoying every minute of it, and writing reviews for the blog, which, in the show notes, you can track me down, jrhandley.com. And then I'm about to start the last book in the Galaxy's Edge universe, Retribution. I've been putting it off because I'm almost afraid for it to end, but there are enough follow-on books that I don't have to do that anymore. So I'm going to bite the bullet. And of course, I'm going to do some short stories so I can get some review for my blog. So I have content because I've kind of forgotten about it for a while. Oops. It happens. So finally, we like to remember the science that makes science fiction fun. Since this is your debut episode, we decided to go easy on you. So what medical tech would you like to see more from fiction into fact there, Doc?
Nerve innervation. Dealing with nerve pain is horrific. We really don't have much that can affect some levels of nerve pain. But also the ability to address not just phantom limbs, but even attaching new limbs. Like that would be great. I know it was funny. A couple years ago, I joked that I faced one of my worst fears, which was I had carpal tunnel surgery, but the thought of not being able to do something with my hands had always really scared me. And so being able to reinnervate or give people back their lives after something that has happened, whether it be traumatic or just a degenerative nerve condition. I knew a soldier who picked one up when he was in the service, and it's nerve pain and also just improving nerve function. Those kind of things, regenerating limbs would be great.
Cool. So I would definitely say the Bacta tanks from Star Wars would be a nice cure of diseases that didn't necessarily involve surgery. Failing that, I think the Raider implants from Terry Mixon's Empire of Bunge universe, mostly because it's on the mind because I'm reading it, but it comes with medical nanites. So you've got a broken bone? Give me a couple hours. So I could totally dig some medical nanites, which Dragon dictation software, by the way, people does not like. Every time I do that, it changes medical nanites into milking Mennonites for some reason. I don't know. Maybe that's where the word holy.
Great fun short story.
Right? Maybe that's where the etymology of holy cow came from. I've said that joke before. So if you've read my my blog or whatever and you've heard it, laugh again, please. I'm begging you. But yeah, so it's one of those things that the implants. Oh, another one is the implants in the Theogony universe by Chris Kennedy, because that makes you lose weight, and I could totally dig that too. Like exercise, get these shots.
Who needs exercise, man?
Yeah, I really like Chris Kennedy's Theogony universe. When he comes back to that, I'll definitely jump back on board because it doesn't take itself too seriously, and I take nothing seriously. So, but as we bring this to a close, Cisca, how can listeners find you? What do you care to share?
So I am very reachable through the fantasy literature at DragonCon on Facebook. I have a Facebook profile under Cisca Smalls. You can typically find it. And then I have a friend who's been pestering me about starting a blog. So I will probably be doing just that because my friend is normally right, even though I try to tell him he's not. So I'm just giving up and letting him win. But those are typically, and then I also have a Goodreads, and I'll put the links in the comments so people can see what crazy stuff I've been reading. I tend to read a lot, so.
All right, outstanding. We'll get all those in the show notes, dear listener, and you can check her out and stalk her as you do on the interwebs these days. And you can find us on our website at www.sfshenanigans.com. Our Twitter is at SFS_show, Sierra Foxtrot Sierra _show. Our email is podcast@sfshenanigans.com. And our Facebook group, where she is a member and we will be making her an admin, facebook.com/groups/SFshenanigans. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Chris Winder and Cisca Smalls, I'm J.R. Handley, and this was the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of space and all things that go boom.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that archived episode that was in the digital memory hole that we found. We thought you'd enjoy it. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the archive for the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back at our regular scheduled time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.